They sold the untamable alien girl for meat until a human spent his last fuel to save her.
The sun on Theros 3 didn't rise, it flared. A hard, merciless light cut through red clouds, casting long, harsh shadows over the decaying trade post. Wind kicked up fine, rust-colored sand that stuck to skin, clothes, and every exposed surface. The air was hot, thin, and smelled of dry blood, exhaust fumes, and sun-baked plastic. Kalen Rourke guided his sand rover to a halt at the outer wall of the market zone. His fuel gauge blinked red. Less than a quarter canister left. Maybe enough to get him halfway back to his work site. Maybe not. He sat in the driver's seat for a few seconds, forehead resting against the heel of his hand, jaw tight. This wasn't the plan. He was a contract surveyor, not a trader, not a rescuer. Not anymore. His last 2 jobs had failed. The soil on this side of Theros was too acidic to support agricultural conversion. The colony boards wouldn't approve a renewal. His account was empty. His gear barely worked. And now he was here, at the dirtiest edge of a broken world, trying to trade spare parts for a fuel top-off before his rig died in the canyons. As he stepped out of the vehicle, heat struck him like a fist. He pulled his coat tighter around his frame. It was cracked and sun-faded. The once blue emblem of the Terran Agricultural Corps nearly scraped off the shoulder. Inside the trade post perimeter, voices swelled around rows of ragged stalls. Old cargo pallets turned into makeshift vendor booths. Vendors shouted offers in basic and broken trade dialects. Cryo meat, scrap gear, fuel cells, biosalvage, filtered water. Most of it overpriced and half-rotted. He moved with purpose, head down, eyes scanning for a decent seller. He wasn't here to browse. Just fuel. Nothing else. Then he heard the crowd. Not talking. Roaring. He turned his head. South platform. Elevated slab of welded scrap and bolted girders. Traders stood on crates and broken crates around the edge, half of them jeering. A guard kicked something at the center of the platform. No someone. She fell forward onto her knees, the chains around her wrists yanking tight as she hit the metal. Her head lifted slowly. Kalen froze. Her skin was violet, deep purple bruised by fresher reds and blacks. Not painted, not cosmetic. That was her real color. Her bare arms were marked with faint bioluminescent patterns, thin, faintly glowing under the sunlight. Her eyes were amber and sharp, shaped like a predator's. Her white hair was tangled, streaked with sweat and blood, falling over her face in wild ropes. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't begging. She was snarling. The traders called her Meat Beast. Untamable. Violent. Not good for labor. Not good for bed. Not good for anything. According to the auctioneer's voice, amplified through a speaker rigged to a power cell, they tried to sell her 3 times. No one took her. She broke a trader's jaw, bit off the tip of a handler's finger. Didn't speak. Didn't obey. They'd marked her for slaughter. She's exotic, one trader shouted. High marrow content. Fatten her up. You get more per liter. The man beside him laughed. Good luck fattening that. She tried to kill her own handler just for tossing a ration at her. Kalen didn't move. She looked around, eyes darting over the crowd. Not in fear. She was scanning, measuring distance, angles, exit points. But her legs were weak. She'd been starved. Her body was shivering, even in the heat. He didn't realize he was walking until the crowd shifted to let him through. His boots scraped against the platform as he stepped up beside the auctioneer. You looking to bid, outsider? The auctioneer said, squinting at him. Kalen said nothing. He just looked at her. At her posture, tense, low to the ground like she was ready to spring but had nowhere to go. At her chains, steel, tight enough to bite through skin. At her clothing, shredded strips of ceremonial fabric, wrapped around her chest and hips, more for humiliation than decency. Final call, the auctioneer said. No buyers. We gut her and ice the marrow. Kalen reached into his coat. His hand came out holding a metal cylinder the length of a forearm, red-capped. The auctioneer's eyes widened. Is that 100% fuel? Rover grade, Kalen said flatly. enough to get across the southern ridge. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Kalen spoke again. For her. The auctioneer blinked. You're serious? Kalen didn't respond. She's not yours once she kills you. She won't. Fine, the auctioneer said. She's yours. Your death, your problem. The guards hesitated. One leaned in toward Kalen. Last I tried to touch her lost an eye. Unlock her, Kalen said. They did. Her wrists came free. The chain clattered to the ground. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she lunged. The crowd screamed and backed up, but she didn't attack. She didn't run either. She just stood at the edge of the platform, chest heaving, glaring at everyone like she dared them to come closer. Kalen turned and walked. Calm, unarmed. He didn't look back. He walked straight toward the gate, his coat dragging dust behind him. The alien girl hesitated. Her legs trembled. Blood still trickled down her arm. But slowly, one step at a time, she followed. The trip back to his outpost was silent. She rode in the back of the rover, crouched low in the corner, knees pulled to her chest, eyes locked on him. He didn't speak. Neither did she. By the time they reached the canyon, his bunker hidden behind a half-collapsed rock arch, the sky was turning gray. A storm was coming. The bunker door creaked open on manual levers. Inside, it was tight. One cot, one workbench, 2 solar cookers, trays of failing seed tests. The walls were steel, patched with scrap. The air smelled like solder, recycled water, and overcooked protein. He offered her food. She didn't move. He placed a water flask on the floor near her and stepped away. She stared at it for nearly 10 minutes before she reached for it. Her hands were shaking. Kalen sat on the cot, watched her, not with pity, not with curiosity, with something else. Caution. He knew she wasn't safe, but he hadn't lied. He didn't think she'd kill him. Maybe he didn't care. She hadn't said a word. She hadn't thanked him. But she was here, and she was watching him too. The wind howled outside. A low creak echoed through the bunker as the storm hit the canyon rim. Kalen didn't sleep that night. Neither did she. They just breathed, together, waiting. And somehow, the silence between them didn't feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them understood. Not yet. Kalen stood at the workbench, tightening a cracked fitting on the water recycler. The steady click of his hand tool echoed in the bunker, layered beneath the muffled whine of the sandstorm outside. The wind beat against the steel hatch like fists, but inside, it was still. Tense. She hadn't moved from the corner. Sainri crouched with her back against the far wall, wrapped in a thermal tarp he'd left on the floor. The same faded cloth scraps still clung to her body, but now the tarp covered most of her legs. Her arms were still exposed, scabbed, marked raw. She hadn't spoken. She hadn't tried to run, but she watched him like a predator, unsure if the man in the room was a threat or just nothing. Kalen worked in silence, not because he was ignoring her. He just didn't know what to say. Words didn't seem useful with someone who might not understand him, or might just choose not to, but the silence was doing something else. It gave her time. Time to breathe. Time to adjust. Time to realize no one here was going to hurt her. Or maybe that was wishful thinking. She was still coiled tight. Even in the blanket, her shoulders never fully relaxed. Every sound, every movement he made drew her gaze. Not wide-eyed fear, but wary calculation. She's waiting for a trap, he thought. He didn't blame her. He placed a clean cloth, a metal bowl of warm water, and a sealed med patch on the bench beside him. He didn't look at her when he spoke. You're bleeding, he said plainly. Left forearm. The chain tore through skin. Might go septic if I don't clean it. No response. You don't have to come over. He glanced sideways. I'll leave this here. You can clean it yourself. Or not. He set the bowl down, stepped away, and moved toward the solar cooker. That's when he noticed it. Her head tilted slightly, not in refusal. Curiosity. Her eyes flicked between the bowl and his face. Still silent. Still watching. Kalen unwrapped a ration bar, split it, and placed half on the table nearest her. Eat. She stared at it. Didn't touch it, but her eyes didn't leave it either. He sat across the room, near the cot, and ate his half slowly. The gesture was intentional. He wanted her to see that he wasn't poisoned, Wasn't faking, wasn't trying to fool her. She didn't move for several minutes. Then, without standing, she crawled forward just enough to grab the ration, then slipped back into the corner like a shadow. She ate it in small bites, one piece at a time, chewing slowly. Kaylin said nothing. He just watched her arms, every muscle, every twitch. Her breathing had slowed slightly. The tension in her jaw softened. He leaned back against the wall. The concrete was cold through his shirt. He glanced toward her again. "Do you understand me?" he asked, not expecting an answer. She didn't nod, didn't shake her head, but her eyes narrowed. He took that as a yes. "Sainri," he said softly. Her head tilted. "That's your name." It was on the registry tag. Tattered piece of brass tied to your chain. Her gaze shifted. She blinked once, slowly, like she recognized the sound but hadn't heard it spoken aloud in a long time. He leaned forward slightly. "Is it right?" No reply, but she didn't growl. She didn't bare her teeth. That was something. Kaylin stood again, walked over to the med bowl, picked it up. "I'll clean your arm. You can let me. Or you can do it. If you come at me, I won't fight back, but I won't try again after." Still no answer. But this time she stood. Not straight, not proudly. She was still weak. Her knees shook as she took 2 steps toward him. Her body was bruised, ribs too visible, but the way she moved low, measured, still had a dangerous grace. She stopped a meter away. He held the cloth out. She didn't take it. Instead, after a tense second, she extended her left arm, slowly, toward him. Kaylin's breath caught in his chest. Not from fear, for what the gesture meant. She was giving him permission. He dipped the cloth, wrung it out, and reached for her forearm. The skin was torn, crusted with dry blood. He worked carefully, gentle pressure. No sudden moves, no words. She winced once, hissed under her breath, but didn't pull away. When it was clean, he wrapped it in the med band. The seal beeped softly as it closed around her forearm. Cooling agents hissed. Still silence. Still watching. But the air between them had changed. The tension hadn't vanished, but something had cracked. Kaylin stepped back, gave her space. She lowered her arm, looked down at the bandage, then back at him. Her eyes didn't hold gratitude. Not yet, but they no longer held open challenge either. Later that evening, as the sun set behind the canyon ridge and the wind died, she moved to the center of the room and curled up near the warmth exhaust vent. Still facing him, still silent, but not in the corner. And she slept. For the first time since he'd seen her, she slept. Kaylin sat at the workbench, hands resting on his knees, listening to her breathing slow, steady. He didn't know what she was. He didn't know what she'd done or what she'd survived. But she wasn't an animal, and she sure as hell wasn't meat. He glanced toward the half-empty fuel canister sitting on the shelf. His way out, his future, gone. And now this girl, this strange, scarred, silent alien, was lying in the center of his shelter like a curled blade waiting to unfold. He hadn't meant to save anyone, but now she was here, and he wasn't sending her back. Not now, not ever. Morning on Theros, 3 was slower in the canyon. The wind still howled above, but down here, near the stone-sheltered edge, the bunker stayed dim and quiet, like a forgotten pocket of the planet. Kaylin sat at the edge of the cot, pulling on his boots. His shirt clung to his back, damp with heat and stale bunker air. The solar lamps buzzed overhead, one of them flickering. A new crack had appeared in the outer panel from last night's storm, which meant another repair, if he could spare the sealant. Across the room, Sainri was awake, not sitting, not speaking, but watching. She hadn't moved from the exhaust vent where she'd fallen asleep. The thermal blanket still wrapped around her lower body, though it had slipped off one shoulder. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes were alert. Kaylin didn't speak. Instead, he walked over to the grow trays lining the far wall. Wilted leaves, yellowed stems, a few nutrient pods that hadn't dissolved properly. His agricultural experiment was failing. He knew that. It was why the company had pulled support. But it was the only job he'd been able to keep since coming to Theros. He lifted one of the pods, cracked it open with a small tool, and dug out the usable pulp. Then, he checked the solar cooker's charge level. Low, but enough to warm something. He prepped 2 portions of ration mush, one with the greens mixed in, one without. When he placed the second bowl in front of Sainri, she didn't recoil. She looked at it, then up at him. He didn't gesture, didn't explain. She took the bowl. Slowly, she ate in silence. Kalen sat down with his portion, leaned back against the wall. After 2 mouthfuls, he broke the silence. "Your markings," he said, without raising his voice. "They're bioluminescent. Adaptive traits, probably from a cooler biome than this. Which means your people aren't native to Theros." No answer. "But you're not a clone," he continued. "Not engineered. You flinch when you smell burnt polyfiber. That's memory, not programming." Her gaze was unreadable. Kalen let the pause stretch before speaking again. "I saw your name on a brass tag, but I didn't see a species listing. Registry had it blacked out. Traders called you a non-compliant bioform. That's not a name. It's a legal loophole. Means you weren't protected under standard sentient protocols." This time, her eyes narrowed. Her fingers tightened slightly on the bowl. "You understand that," he said quietly. Still no words. But her expression changed. Something was rising, slow, cautious. Recognition. He waited. Then she spoke. Her voice was rough, lower than he expected, each syllable careful. "Why did you take me?" Kalen looked down at his boots, rubbed a finger over the patch on his coat, half torn, almost invisible now. "I didn't think about it," he said. "I saw them deciding what part of you to butcher first, and I didn't think. A beat. I just acted." She stared at him. Not angry, not grateful, something in between. "I bit one of them," she said. "I heard. I would have bitten you too. I was expecting it. Why didn't you chain me again?" He met her eyes. "Because I didn't need to." Her gaze lingered. There was confusion there, and something else, annoyance maybe, as if his answer didn't make sense to her. She set the bowl down, pulled the thermal tarp tighter over her legs. "I can't go back out there," she said. "I know. They'll look for me. Not likely. You were marked as salvageable waste. Once they logged the sale, they moved on." "And you?" she asked. "Why are you here? Alone?" Kalen hesitated. He hadn't talked about that in a long time. "I was stationed here 5 years ago. Contract botanist. The idea was to test soil viability. Theros was supposed to be a new agricultural front. Clean it up, turn it green, grow food colonies could rely on." He gestured to the dead trays. "Didn't work." She tilted her head. "Why stay?" He exhaled slow. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." That quiet hung between them again. 2 people who had both, in their own way, been discarded. She looked around the bunker now, eyes scanning more slowly than before. The walls, the gear, the patched vents. She saw the cot, the tools, the hydro cell patched with frayed wire. "You live here," she said flat. "I survive here. Is that different?" He looked up. "Sometimes." The wind howled again outside, but quieter now. The storm was weakening. Sainri stood, wrapping the blanket around her hips. Her balance was still off, but she moved with a little more steadiness. Her injuries weren't fresh anymore. She wasn't shaking. She walked over to the sink, picked up the metal bowl from the night before, washed it without being asked, dried it, set back down. Kalen didn't say anything, but he watched her closely. Later, she found the solar tarp draped over the gear pile. She wrapped it over her shoulders and leaned near the vent again, closer to the cot this time. She didn't growl. She didn't bare her teeth. That night, they sat in silence. The space between them no longer thick with danger, just weight. A quiet weight. When she finally lay down, she faced him, and he didn't look away. She blinked slowly once, then slept. And Kalen, for the first time in months, allowed himself to sleep too. There was still danger. There were still things unsaid. But the woman on the floor was no longer a stranger. She was watching. She was learning. And for now, she was choosing to stay. Theros 3's nights were cold. Not mild, not dry. Cold enough to make breath fog inside the bunker. The heat exhaust vent wasn't enough. The small generator could only cycle warmth for 4 hours at a time. After that, the temperature dropped. Kalen woke first. Not from a sound, just instinct. He sat up slowly, the cot creaking under his weight. Across the room, Sainri was curled tightly against the bulkhead wall. The thermal blanket had slipped down again. Her skin, though thick and alien, wasn't immune to cold. She shivered once, then stilled again. He got up silent, walked over to the cook's shelf, grabbed the emergency tarp, coarse but heat-retentive, and crouched beside her. She opened her eyes instantly, alert, but she didn't move. "I'm not touching you," he said, "just covering you." She didn't answer, but she didn't resist. He laid the tarp over her shoulders, careful not to let it slide across her bare arm. He noticed the skin up close, fine-textured, almost scaled like soft mineral. Her markings had dulled slightly in the cold. The glowing lines along her ribs and neck were barely visible now. She spoke, voice low and steady. "You don't look away." He met her eyes. "I'm not trying to see anything you don't want me to. You're not afraid of me?" He shrugged faintly. "I was at first. Now I'm aware of you." She considered that, her expression unreadable. Then she asked, "Do you think I'm still dangerous?" "Yes," he said plainly, "but not to me." Her eyes searched his, for something. Then she lay her head back and closed them again. Kalen stepped away, but only halfway. He sat against the opposite wall, pulled his coat tight, and waited for the sun. The next day was colder. The storm system above had drawn heat from the upper atmosphere, and the solar panels were too buried in dust to recharge properly. By midday, the generator's heating cycle was gone. Kalen prepped tools, opened the hatch, and stepped out with a cloth mask over his mouth. Sainri followed. Not close, not far, just there. She didn't ask what he was doing, but she watched as he scraped dust from the panels, as he angled the mirrors, as he checked the seals. She circled the site once, watched the ridges, listened to the wind. She moved like a scout, not lost, not aimless. Her instincts were still sharp. When they returned inside, the heat was still gone. "You'll get sick," he said. "I don't get sick," she replied. "Everyone gets sick. If the cold breaks the skin barrier, bacteria do the rest. Same across species." She looked at him, then looked at the cot. He followed her gaze, then looked back at her. "I'm not offering. Not unless you ask." A pause. Then, "I'm asking," she said flat and clear. He nodded once. The cot was narrow, built for one. But it didn't matter. She didn't lie beside him. Not fully. She curled near the edge, back turned, one hand resting on the floor. Her breathing was quiet, measured, but not tense. Kalen didn't speak, didn't move, but he could feel her warmth through the tarp. Her back close, her presence deliberate. That night, neither of them slept much. He could feel the weight of every breath she took. Hear her shift just slightly. Smell the faintest trace of ash and wind in her hair. But he didn't touch her. She didn't touch him. It wasn't time yet, but something had changed. The next morning, she cooked. He woke to the sound of water boiling, a ration slab heating on the solar plate. She moved with purpose, not like someone playing house, but like someone who had done this before. She didn't speak, didn't look at him when he sat across from her. She passed him a bowl. It was the first time she gave instead of took. He ate in silence. She did too. Afterward, she asked, "How long will the generator last?" He ran the math in his head. "If I cut lights and keep the hydro line sealed, maybe 9 days. Then we're out." She nodded once. "If we go back to the traders," she said, "they'll kill us both." "I know." Silence again. Then she stood, pulled the tarp from the cot, and folded it. Looked at him directly. "I'll help fix your farm." Kalen blinked. "It's dead. The soil's dead. That's why they pulled funding. I've seen soil worse than this. It just needs to be burned and rebonded." He stared. "Burned with what?" "Acid root seeds. You use them as a primer. I saw a crate in your storage locker 2 nights ago. You didn't open it." He stood, moved to the locker, opened it. There they were, dusty, sealed, and labeled in a language he hadn't bothered to translate. "Why are you helping?" he asked. She answered without looking away. "Because this is the only place I've been where someone asked my name." And that silenced him. He felt something shift deep in his chest. Not lust, not pity, recognition. She wasn't healing because of his kindness. She was healing because he let her be herself. Now, she was choosing to stay, to help, to live. And for the first time, Kalen allowed himself to feel what he hadn't felt in years. hope. By the fifth morning, the bunker felt different. Not just quieter, but fuller. Like every breath, every footstep carried weight. Shared space no longer felt accidental. Kalen stood near the seed trays, sleeves rolled, gloves on. He watched Sainri pour a measured dose of nutrient-rich fluid into the soil, her movements precise. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Her knowledge was exact, instinctive. She'd rebonded 3 trays, already using the acid root primers. Burned off the bad layer. Laid new composite. Her hands worked quickly, but with care. "You've done this before," Kalen said. "I told you." He nodded, but his eyes lingered on her hands. Her fingertips had changed, once curled and cautious, now steady, deliberate. She wasn't hiding them anymore. He handed her a rag. She took it, wiped her palms clean. For a moment, their fingers touched. Brief, unplanned, but neither pulled away. Kalen felt the tension immediately, low, deep, quiet. Not threat, not fear, just heat. She didn't look away. Neither did he. For a few seconds, the only sound was the soft buzz of the hydro lines. Then she broke the eye contact, walked toward the water table, filled a flask, drank. Her throat moved slowly. Kalen forced himself to focus. He checked the solar converter, calibrated the sun mirror angle. Every task felt mechanical now, repetitive, deliberate, like keeping his hands busy would slow down his pulse. It didn't. Later that day, he entered the washroom compartment, barely the size of a closet, with a sink, a cracked mirror, and a water funnel. The water pressure was weak, and the filters stank of age. When he came out, towel draped over his shoulder, Sainri was waiting near the cot. She didn't speak. Her eyes drifted to the towel, then to the water funnel, then back to him. "I haven't had clean water on my skin in over a year," she said. He nodded. "It's functional, limited pressure, not much heat." She stepped toward him, close. He didn't move. Then, calmly, without ceremony, she slipped past him into the washroom and closed the metal door. He heard the water run. Low. He didn't move for a long time. When she came out, minutes later, she was wrapped in a clean cloth from the supply rack. The makeshift towel clung to her hips. Her white hair was wet, now clinging to her back and shoulders. Droplets clung to her collarbone, catching the bunker's low light. She looked different. Clean, yes, but something else. Freer. Her arms no longer crossed in defense. Her gaze wasn't cold. He handed her another dry cloth. Their fingers touched again. This time, she didn't pull away. Later, the lights dimmed. Storms had returned, slowing the recharge cycle. No generator. Just ambient heat, barely enough. Sainri stood beside the cot. "It's too cold to sleep apart." He didn't answer. She didn't wait for one. She stepped closer, lifted the blanket, slid in beside him. Their bodies touched barely. Hips, shoulders. She faced away, her breathing steady. But her hand found his. Slowly, her fingers curled around his wrist. Not possessive, not needy, anchoring. Kalen stared at the ceiling for a long time. He didn't move, didn't speak, but he didn't let go. Eventually, her head rested lightly against his chest. No tension, no command, just warmth, just choice. She fell asleep like that. And Kalen didn't sleep at all. He stayed awake, listening to the soft hum of her breath, the weight of her presence against him. Everything in his life had been about survival, data, reports, soil readings. This wasn't data. This was something else. And whatever it was, it had chosen to lie against his heart. Kalen opened his eyes slowly. Light filtered through the small viewport, filtered and reddish, casting lines across the ceiling. The storm had weakened. The outside world had stopped howling. Inside the bunker, it was quiet. He didn't move at first. He was warm, not from the broken generator, but from the body beside his. Sainri. She was still asleep. Her breath was slow, steady, soft against his collarbone. Her body curled slightly into his. The fabric of the cloth she wore bunched lightly where it had shifted during the night. One of her legs had slid across his, bare skin brushing against his thigh, smooth and firm, her bioluminescent markings faintly pulsing in the dim light. She wasn't faking sleep. Her body was loose. Her hands still rested on his chest, fingertips spread, like she was making sure he hadn't disappeared. He didn't speak, didn't move. But inside, something was cracking open, like pressure being released from sealed room. Something heavy he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. When she stirred, it was slow. Her head lifted slightly. Her eyes opened, yellow gold and sharp. For a moment, she looked confused. Then she remembered. She didn't flinch. She didn't move away. "You're awake," she said quietly. He nodded once. Didn't sleep much. She tilted her head. "You didn't want to?" "I didn't want to miss anything." Her eyes narrowed faintly, not in suspicion, but in consideration, like she was still not used to being spoken to like a person. "Are you afraid I'll change my mind?" she asked. "No," he said, "but I'm aware you can." She sat up slowly, the sheets slipping from her back. She didn't seem bothered. Her body was strong, marked, scarred in places, but nothing about her posture showed shame. She glanced at him again. "I don't know what this is yet," she admitted, "but I don't want to be cold anymore." Her honesty hit him harder than he expected. Not romantic, not sentimental, just true. "I don't want to be alone anymore," he said. She didn't smile, but she didn't need to. She reached out, touched his shoulder, then his jaw. Her fingers lingered there. He turned into her touch, just slightly, and then she leaned in. There was no rush, no breathless heat, no desperate hunger. It wasn't wild, it was deliberate. Their mouths met gently, uncertain at first, but when neither pulled away, the kiss deepened. It wasn't urgent. It was grounding. It was the kind of kiss that wasn't just about lips or bodies, but about silence breaking. He felt her weight shift as she moved into his lap, straddling him slowly, carefully. Her thighs bracketed his. Her hands slid down to his ribs, fingertips brushing over old scars he never talked about. He didn't hide them. She didn't ask. Their breaths tangled. Foreheads touched. Her hair fell around his face, still damp at the tips. It smelled like clean water and rusted metal. Like her. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Where her cloth slid away, she let it fall. Not out of seduction, but out of decision. She was showing him herself, unguarded, unashamed. He responded in kind. Simple movements. Honest. No performance. Just skin. Contact. Heat shared in the freezing dark. Their rhythm was slow. Muted. A conversation their bodies had needed to have. Without words, without explanations. She didn't moan. He didn't groan. They breathed each other in. Their eyes locked. There was nothing to prove. No fantasy to act out. Just survival turning into something warmer, something chosen. And when it was over, when the tension had burned out through their fingertips and hips and breath, they stayed pressed together. Still, quiet. Her cheek rested against his chest again. His fingers combed slowly through the white of her hair. He didn't ask what came next. She didn't promise anything. But she whispered one thing into his skin. "Thank you for not being afraid of me." And he answered, low and honest, "You never scared me." They didn't sleep. Not really. But they didn't need to. For the first time, the bunker didn't feel like a hiding place. It felt like the center of something real. For weeks later, the bunker no longer smelled like dust and metal. It smelled like life. Fresh growth. Damp soil. The faint trace of acidic pollen blooming under the makeshift grow lamps. The trays had changed. Rows of deep green sprouts filled the corner wall, thick-leaved and firm. The acid root primers had worked. The soil was bonding again. 2 trays had already begun producing edible shoots, enough for 2 small meals a day. It wasn't much, but it was sustainable. Kalen adjusted the irrigation drip, then leaned back and wiped his hands on a rag. His arms were smudged with earth. His shirt clung to his frame, soaked with sweat and effort. He stood in silence for a moment, looking over what they'd built. Behind him, the door to the sleeping compartment opened. Sainri stepped out barefoot, wrapped in a scarf she'd reshaped into a top. Her long white hair was pulled back with a strip of cloth. She moved like she belonged here now. Purposeful, relaxed, shoulders no longer tense. She looked at him, then at the trays. "First harvest tomorrow," she said. He nodded. "Just enough for soup. That's better than scavenged protein bricks." He smirked faintly. "Barely." She walked toward him, arms crossed, head tilted. "You're not sleeping much again." "I've been working." "You're thinking too hard." He looked at her. "About what?" She stepped closer. "About me. About us." He didn't deny it. "I've never had anything like this," he said. "A rhythm. A reason." She stopped inches from him. "And now you do." Kalen let his hand rest on her waist. Fingers splayed across the bare skin of her side. She leaned into the touch, pressing her forehead lightly to his. "I don't want to leave," she said softly. "I don't want you to," he replied. "But I want to go outside. I want to see the canyon. Walk in the sun without chains. Stand on something that isn't concrete or steel." Kalen's throat tightened. "I can take you. There's a trail, South Ridge. The storms have cleared." She smiled. A small, hard-earned smile. "Then take me." The hike was slow. Her stride was strong again, but cautious. The narrow path wound along a jagged ledge. Red rock rising high on one side, the canyon dropping sharply on the other. Kalen walked ahead, carrying a pack. She followed, close enough to catch him if he slipped, not that he would. When they reached the ridge peak, she stopped. The wind stirred her hair. The sun lit her skin in tones of violet and silver. She stood there in silence, taking in the valley below, twisting rivers of dust, collapsed shuttle husks, broken stone. But far in the distance, something green. Not much, not loud, but green. A single line of growth along the canyon bottom. Proof that something had survived here. Her voice came soft. "This place isn't dead." "No," he said. "It's just quiet." She turned toward him, eyes bright but serious. "I was waiting for someone to own me or kill me. I never imagined someone might just keep me company." He stepped closer, reached for her hand. "I didn't imagine anything. I just saw someone who deserved better." She took his hand and brought it to her cheek, nuzzling it once before lowering it again. Her face held no doubt. "I want to stay," she said. "Not because I owe you, not because you saved me, but because I choose this." He touched her cheek, his thumb brushing a glowing mark beneath her eye. "Then we'll make this a home." Back at the bunker that night, they lit a small fire on the balcony slab outside the hatch. Not for heat, but for light. For celebration. They sat together, legs tangled, blanket around both shoulders. The bunker still groaned in the wind. The water system still needed patching. The solar grid was always half broken, but none of it mattered. They were no longer just surviving. They were living. Together. And no one, not traitors, not hunger, not storms, would ever take that from them again. The days were longer now. Warmth stretched deeper into the canyon floor as the dust storm slowed, and light finally lingered in the cracks between rock and ruin. The small field behind the bunker, once dry and unusable, now showed rows of green shoots, layered in firm soil they'd reclaimed by hand. It had been 72 days since Kalen traded his last fuel unit for a chained, growling girl marked for slaughter. It had been 72 days since Sainri looked anyone in the eyes and didn't see threat or price tags. This morning, there was no emergency to handle, no leaks to fix, no soil trays to rebalance. For the first time in months, everything was functioning, if imperfectly. Kalen lay back on the outer balcony, shirtless, arms folded behind his head, the sun warming his chest. His skin had darkened more since the storms faded, his stubble now a rough beard, jawline stronger with weight regained. His breath rose slow and steady, not from exhaustion, but ease. The sound of bare feet on metal brought his attention toward the hatch. She stepped out. Sainri, uncovered, unafraid. Her body moved fluidly now, no longer cautious, no longer wary. Her hips swayed in an unconscious rhythm. The old cloths were long gone. She wore a short wrap made from an old pilot's jacket cut and re-sewn, snug around her waist, open at the sides. One of his old shirts was tied around her ribs, knotted between her breasts. Loose, unbuttoned, deliberate. Her skin shimmered faintly under the light, violet cerulean tones shifting as she walked. The faint bioluminescent markings along her shoulders and thighs pulsed slowly, like they were syncing with her heartbeat. When she reached him, she crouched. "You're not working," she said. "I'm resting," he replied. "You should try it." She tilted her head. "I'd rather do something better with the time." Her tone wasn't playful. It wasn't seductive. It was clear, intentional. He sat up slowly, his breath catching just slightly as she slid her knees over his lap, straddling him without hesitation. Her thighs pressed around his waist, her hands finding his chest. "I've wanted this," she said softly. "Not for warmth, not for safety, just for us." He didn't speak. He just touched her. First her waist, his hands firm but measured, sliding around to her back where the scars were. She didn't flinch. She arched into the contact. Then her hips, his thumbs tracing the soft line of skin above the cloth, his fingers memorizing the way her muscles shifted under his palms. Her own hands moved next, over his shoulders, then his jaw. She guided his face toward hers with 2 fingers and kissed him. Not gently this time, not cautiously. Hungry, but still in control. The kiss deepened, their breaths sinking. Her hips shifted, sliding down against him with slow, certain weight. The cloth between them was thin. It gave way easily as she rocked forward again. He groaned in her mouth, not loud, not performative, just real. Her hands ran down his chest, grounding herself. His arms wrapped fully around her back, pressing her close. Skin on skin, heat and tension and choice. When she pulled back, it was only to look at him. Her face wasn't flushed. It was calm, focused. "I want all of you," she whispered. "Now, not rushed, not desperate." He nodded. She stood, unwrapped the jacket skirt, dropped the knotted shirt, stood fully exposed in front of him, the canyon sun lighting every mark, every curve, every part of her that had once been hidden behind fear and survival. Then she took his hand, pulled him up, let him inside. The bed wasn't big. The blankets were old, but it didn't matter. They took their time. Hours, not minutes. No tension, no urgency. They explored each other's bodies like maps they finally had time to study. Every breath, every inch of contact was deliberate. He learned where her scars were most sensitive. She learned where his touch slowed, where his breath caught, where he liked her weight pressing down on him, where she liked his grip strongest. There were pauses, moments of stillness where she stared down at him, brushing his hair back with her fingers. Moments where he kissed the inside of her thigh without moving further, just to hear her sigh. No one performed. No one led. They moved together, equal and willing, until tension gave way to release, and release gave way to quiet. When it was over, their bodies were tangled. Not in exhaustion, but comfort. He kissed her shoulder. She kissed his chest. They didn't speak. Didn't need to. Outside, the grow trays ticked quietly, the pumps running low and steady. Inside, nothing was broken. Nothing was missing. The alien girl they called Untamable now curled against the man who gave everything for her when she was worth nothing. And she chose to stay. Not because she needed to, but because she wanted to.